guys, this is Michael Fomkin with Alycia Kaback, and we are doing a special edition of Hollywood Mindset TV and the VIP Ignite Live podcast. So if you are just joining us for the very first time, what this is going to be all about is it's a podcast and kind of let me start over again. I lost my point. Hey guys, this is Michael Fomkin and Alycia Kaback, and we are live on Hollywood Mindset TV and the VIP Ignite Live podcast. And if you are just joining us for the first time, this is designed to help people who are interested in the modeling, acting, and or music industry. So we actually will be answering the questions that no one ever gives you the answers to. We're going to be giving you the advice that you cannot find on a Google search. We're going to go really in-depth with the industry. So with that thought in mind, since this is our kind of kickoff special edition episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, how we came up with this idea and a little bit about the company and so forth. So with that thought in mind, Miss Alycia Kaback.
Hey, everybody. So, what I could tell you is when you are an aspiring artist, right? Like I could tell you when I was 6 years old, I had a dream that I wanted to get into show business. Where do you go to even find answers? And as Michael says, a lot of people turn to Google. Wouldn't it be great if you had a mentor, somebody that actually can teach you? I mean, I would never get into a car, Mike, without a roadmap, especially lately. You need navigation everywhere you go. So mentorship is a big part of our program. And Mike, do you want to go over the idea that you came up with years ago and you had come to me? Do you want to?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So actually, we've been doing this now for over 14 years. And I've always had an interest in, the entertainment industry and modeling and acting, just like anyone else growing up. And you're in school plays and high school plays. And I actually used to be in the restaurant industry. When I graduated college, I kind of didn't know what to do with my life. So somehow I managed to buy myself a restaurant. I did that for a really long time, had a lot of fun with it. But if you're not familiar with working in the restaurant industry, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of, long hours. And it kind of starts coming a little bit boring because you're kind of doing the same thing every day. So I decided to sell it and, took a year off of my life. And I was like, well, what can I do? What should I do with my life? And I don't know, I think I was online. This is a long time ago. This is before Facebook. This is before iPhones. Like, this is like that long ago, right? It's like a whole different world. So anyway, I was online. I saw some ad and it was like, would you like to own a modeling agency? And the ad actually said, own a modeling agency, get to judge swimsuit contests and hang out with beautiful people. Yeah, and I was like, I want to own a modeling agency. I want to hang out with beautiful people and judge swimsuit contests. That sounds like that's like a dream job, right? Yeah, like I'm like chopping garlic all day. This is going to be great. So anyway, I wind up, going through the application process, and the company was based out of Orlando. And I flew down there, and I literally walk into this building, and it's kind of like when you're looking to buy a franchise, they want to show you about the company, kind of explain everything to you. It's standard, whether you're buying a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Subway, it's kind of like the procedure they do. It's like a discovery day, they call it. So anyway, I fly down there, I'm all excited, I get all dressed up, and, I walk into this building, and they literally must have had, it was the most gorgeous building I've ever seen. They probably had close to 3,000 employees there. Everyone was dressed to the nines. The parking lot was filled with BMWs and Mercedes Benzes, and just like it literally like you just walked into this whole nother world. And part of the concept that what they had started it was a young company. They've only been in business for a little over a year. They went from 5 employees to literally over 1,000. Like they just like literally skyrocketed. And their concept was at this time was that the fashion industry, the modeling industry needed to go digital. Okay. So now to give you a little bit of a backstory, just for you guys who are not familiar with this, some of you guys might be listening to this or watching this and weren't even born at this time, but there was a time and place where the internet wasn't the priority in everybody's life. But it was coming, right? The internet was starting to kind of take control. And I remember a very specific quote from that time period where the editor-in-chief of the New York Times had said that the New York Times would never be on the internet, that it's a paper, that people want to pick up a paper, they want to read a paper, right? So when you hear that quote now, you're like, what? Like, that's so silly. Who would buy a newspaper? Like, everything's online, right? Think about the music industry, how much that's changed. When was the last time you bought a CD or so forth, or even the book industry? So, having the entire world went digital, but this was at a time period when the world was not entirely digital. So this company, they came up with an idea where they wanted to digitalize modeling agencies, because at that time, most modeling agencies, the biggest agencies in the world, Ford, Wilhelmina, IMG, Click, all the people we work with today that are our friends, back then, they didn't even have computers. So how everything was done was, if a client wanted to book a model, they would call the agency, right? And they would say, hey, they're looking for a blonde haired girl, blue eyes, 5'6" to 5'8", right? So they would have to pick up the phone, call the agent. The agent then, how they would track things, because they didn't have databases, they would use what's like a comp card. So they would have all the models up on the wall. So literally there would be a wall of models. And when you think about it, there's really no way to break down this like a comp card. So for those of you not familiar with a comp card is on the front of it, it's kind of like a model's resume, right? On the front, it'll have a headshot. On the back of the comp card, so think of like a little bit bigger than a postcard, right? Maybe twice the size of a postcard. On the back, it would have 4 different images, and then it would have the model's stats. So it would have their height, their weight, their shoe size, dress size, bust size, and so forth. So that way you would know, because when as modeling is concerned, they're always, measurements are very important, right? Whether it's wardrobe or clothing and fitting and so forth. So anyway, so there's really no way to separate this, right? If you think about it, without a computer, the only thing you could do is you could put up the males on one side, and then you could put the females on the other, right? Then you can separate them by hair color, right? Because if you walk over to the wall and you look, okay, great, they want a female blonde hair. So now you could just instantaneously grab all the females off the wall, and now you've got a pile. So now you have all the females with blonde hair. So now what you start doing is you have to flip the card over, and you have to look, okay, is she 5'6" to 5'8"? If yes, she goes into one pile. If no, she goes into another. And now what'll happen is you'll have 2 piles, one that meets the client's requirements and one that does not. The one that meets the client's requirement, that'll go into like a FedEx bag, or, if you're in a major city, it would go into a messenger, and that would then be sent to the client. The client would then open that up, whether it's a few hours later or a couple of days later. He would then go through it, and he would say, hey, I'm interested in this girl, and that girl. He would then pick up the phone, call the agent back again, try to get them on the phone, say, hey, these are the girls I'm interested in. Are they available? So then the agent now would have to pick up the phone, call the model, see if the model's available, and so forth.
And it also got really expensive for the talent, because if you think about it, Mike, they had paper comp cards with photos. So if they had to get their hair cut or their hair colored, they would literally have to go get new photos made and get all new comp cards. And then every single time the agent would mail off anything, they would have to pay courier fees, which got
exactly, which would actually, for a lot of people who are not familiar with this, those fees would actually be passed on to the model. And like to set up a comp card, like, models back then would spend $450, $500 just to set up the very first comp card. Then they would have to get the photos done and so forth. And then if they change their hair color, or their weight changed, or their look changed in any which way or form, those photos would no longer be able to be used. So they have to start the whole process again. So not only do you have an extreme expense for the models, you have an extreme time constraint for the agency. And what also happens is, if you're a client, they're not just going to call one agency, they're going to call 2 or 3. Whoever gets them the model first is the one that's going to win. And literally this system is how the modeling industry was running for like 80 plus years. So this company, they had said, hey, listen, we work in the digital field, the internet's changing. And what they want to do is they want to work with all the major agencies, literally every agency in the world, and convert them over to a digital database. And when they started the company, as they, would call these different agencies, the agencies, they would like, well, we don't even have computers. We're really not interested in doing this. It sounds silly, like it's too big of an expense. So the company said, okay, great. Well, obviously the agencies aren't interested in it. Why don't we just do it ourselves? Why don't we create a database for talent where clients would be able to register and then do their own search? So not only could you search for eye color, hair color, but you could search for, do they ride a motorcycle? Can they play basketball? Can they, swim? Can they fit? Can they ride a horse? Things like that. Like you could put in all these special skills. And actually the combination of the different special skills, the computer actually could pull up over 1 trillion different combinations from the database by mixing, blonde hair with green eyes who can ride a horse, or, red hair with, brown eyes and can play, ping pong, whatever it may be. So it's actually really brilliant.
For a restaurant, like you wouldn't just go to Google and look for a restaurant. You would want to be specific, location.
Yes.
So Exactly.
And what's the greatest part of it is literally now a client could just literally pull up the models they wanted, and you can have a model booked within seconds versus days. So now that would put you ahead of the competition. Brilliant idea. They were the very first ones to market with this, which if you're familiar with business, most people, when you're the first to market, it's kind of like, you're the one with the arrows in your back. You're the one, it's like, think about like Uber, right? Uber is a great example in today's modern world where they went in and they completely changed the taxi cab industry, right? When I was growing up, I grew up in New York City, I would hail a cab. I cannot remember the last time I hailed a cab. Like I literally just go on my app, boom, 2 minutes later, there's an Uber waiting for me.
Airbnb when you're traveling with big groups, or Instacart to go grocery shopping.
Yeah, exactly. Like Instacart, totally. Like think about it. Like in a few years, you're not even really going to need a grocery store. Like you could literally take those grocery stores and turn them into warehouses where now everything's just it's like Amazon, right? Yep. There's no more need for bookstores, or like the way Walmart, when Walmart came around, they changed the whole industry with like the mom and pop hardware stores.
Christmas Sears catalogs, that was my jam every year.
Exactly. I used to get the spiel, what is it called? Like Sears catalogs. What's the other one? The Spiegel catalog with all the toys in the back. Yeah. So that whole world changed. But at the time, people were very resistant to the change. They were fighting it. Yeah. They were fighting it. They just, they didn't want to make the investment. They didn't want to make the time. The talent loved it. Like it worked really well. But unfortunately, because there was such a big resistance, the company just kind of grew so fast, it kind of imploded on itself. And they wind up, it was just one of those ideas. It's kind of like toys.com. For those of you who really want to go way back, toys.com was a startup company, or cd.com, another one where they sold CDs online, and they were just kind of a little bit ahead of their time. Or if you think about like the digital streaming music, right? When they first started, like companies like Napster, they literally were considered like the anti-music industry, right? The music industry was suing them. But now, look at what Apple did. Like literally, when was the last time you bought a CD? When was the last time you bought a DVD, right? Everything now is digital. But what people forget is they don't see the war or the obstacles these companies got to go through. Really great example of this, one of my favorites, just to kind of put the point across, was when Netflix first started, the most dominant company in the United States for movie rentals was Blockbuster. And Netflix, when they first started, hey, we're going to digitalize movies, people laughed at them. They actually went to Blockbuster, they got a meeting, and they said, hey, we'd love to show you this software. We would love to sell it to you, and we would love to partner up, right? And Blockbuster, all the big, heads of the company and the president and the CEO, they made this meeting, and they literally laughed them out the door. They literally said, this is the stupidest idea we've ever heard. You guys are wasting your time, energy, and you're going to fail, and we want nothing to do with it. And literally less than 36 months later, Blockbuster was gone. Yeah, like today, I think the very last store might have just closed, or it's like in Alaska or something like that. Yeah. So people don't realize, like, when you're in this industry, you got to fight. So the company, when you're the first, it's hard. Unfortunately, they were one of the ones who didn't make it, but they changed the industry. Because now, like 20 years later, because it's like 20 years ago when this all happened, 20 years ago, every agency uses digital, right? Every model is on a platform for being submitted out digitally. Every casting is done digitally. Like there is no more papers being transferred, all via done email. You couldn't even think of going back to that world. So even though they didn't make it, they changed the world. And at the time, when they were kind of building this, they wanted to get the word out there. They had come up with this idea for doing an event. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to bring in casting directors and agencies and models from all over the world and bring them into like one environment, and where the talent would be able to like compete, they would be able to be seen and so forth. And I remember this is right before the company went out of business. They had this big event. I went down there to see what it was all about. And I said, wow, this is really amazing. And as I was kind of walking around, talking to some of the talent, I was like, I'm like, how, you having a good time? They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But they always kept saying, well, I wanted to meet somebody though. Like I'm having the greatest
thousands of people there, right?
Yeah, it was like thousands of, like, oh my God, they must have had over 3,000 talent. They literally, the ballroom was so big, you couldn't see from one side to the other. They had celebrities there, like they had some of the biggest bands in the world there. They had athletes there. Oh my God, it was incredible. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. White glove treatment, like, yeah, it was done, I think, at the Fountain Blue in Miami, which is that's like Elvis's old hotel. Yeah. Elvis used to stay there. It's like a 5-star resort hotel. So it's really magical, but unfortunately, the theatrics of it was great, the knowledge was great, but the talent were missing this connection with the agents, and it was something that was impossible to do. Like, there's no way you could, like, if you think about, if you're the head of a major agency, there's no way you could talk to 3,000 people. Yeah, like you would be there for 2 years, right? Like, there's no way you could just meet with them. So anyway, long story short, after the company had closed, my mind kept thinking about this, and I was like, you know what, I really like what they're doing. That, the digital platform, I wasn't sure about, because I was still kind of stuck in my own way, that mindset where is the world going to head. But I said, you know what, it would be really cool to do an event, but instead of having 3,000 people, why don't we do it at a smaller scale? And, I said, this could kind of work. So I remember I called you, because we were friends at the time, from a previous company. We had known each other. And I said, hey, I have this crazy idea. And I knew you were always like, you had this interest in this, you had this great personality. And I says, hey, what would you think if we did an event, and it was kind of like a wedding? It's like 10 tables, 10 people at each table, really small, really intimate. And that way people can actually get to meet with casting directors, producers, and so forth.
You drew it out like on a notepad.
Yeah, it was like literally like on a little notepad. It was just a simple idea. And I said, okay. And I called you, he said, yeah, let's make this happen. So I said, all right, we'll test it. I said, what do we got to lose? We'll test this out. I was back up in New York. You were still down in Florida. So I said, okay, I'm going to build a website. So I remember, literally programming the site myself and creating all the graphics and the content. And I said, well, let's just put it up and see if anybody's interested. If somebody's interested, great. If not, it is what it is. So literally, all of a sudden, people started applying. And we started, you remember talking to the very first person. And I remember this really so clearly, because we didn't even have the event planned yet. But the very first person came in, because we were actually doing this live. People actually would come into the office. We had to go out and get an office and computers and equipment and lights and, pens and paper and printers and all this stuff, on an idea, on a hope that this could work.
We had no success stories, no legitimacy, no landing.
No, nothing. Yeah, nothing.
It was just like coming soon.
Yeah, just coming soon. We didn't even have a date yet for the event. We didn't even have a date for the event. But but it's an interesting story. I'm going to tell you something why it worked. I'm going to tell you exactly why it worked. I read this. I love reading about famous people. I love reading about people who are successful, right? The best advice I can give anyone listening to this call, if you ever meet somebody who's successful, ask them what was the last book that they read, or what was the book they're currently reading, because you want to read and follow what they're doing. So I remember reading this one story about Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, right? Think about it. iPhone, iPad, Apple TV changed the world, right? Literally everything that we do today goes back to the ideas this man had. So, for those who are not familiar, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But when he was first starting Apple, he just had an idea. He just had a vision. He had nothing going on other than this vision. And he went and he rented this empty warehouse. Literally this old empty warehouse, had a lot of light. There was nothing in it. It was completely empty. All he had in it was a table, a wood table, big giant wood table, and he put chairs around the table. That is it. That's all he had. And then he brought in all these investors. Now, when you're an investor in LA or Silicon Valley, and somebody invites you to come listen to their pitch, you're expecting caviar and steak and wining and dining and 5-star restaurants and they're expecting all of this, right? This is their mindset. They walk into this warehouse and they're like, what? Yeah, nothing. It's a wooden table, and they're like, what is this guy lost his mind? He's like, no, relax, sit down. He had them all sit down, and he told them his vision. He says, I want you to close your eyes. I don't want you to see this warehouse. I want you to see this company called Apple. And this is how we're going to change the world. And that was when he first hired the gentleman who was the head of marketing for Pepsi. Pepsi was the biggest brand in the world. That was like the golden job in the world. And if you watch the film, you read his biographies, you can read this. He said to him, he says, do you want to sell soda water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? He literally took everything this guy did. He poured it right down to the basics. It's soda. It's like sugar water, right? That's all you're selling. Or do you want to be a part of something that's going to change the world? And that vision, that mindset he had is what got every single one of those investors would become every one of them invested into Apple.
They believed in the dream.
Yeah, they believed in the dream. So, the magic of this is when we first started this, we had that vision, we had that passion, and people saw it. And it's still to this day. So now all of a sudden we have these people, they're signing up for this event. Yeah. So now we had to plan an event, right? So I was like, oh my God, we have to plan an event. And I said, okay, well, we need to get some speakers, right? That's going to be the first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, well, back then, it wasn't just easy to pick up the phone and call people like it is now for us.
Google. Yeah.
Right. Or Google people. Google didn't even exist. So we had to actually rely on, we went to Craigslist. Craigslist is an old school posting board. So I remember saying, I just put up an ad and said, hey, we're hosting this event. We're looking for people in the entertainment industry, and, we're going to have lunch, and it's going to be really fun, and you get to share your experience and knowledge. And, oh, by the way, we're going to serve lunch, right? So I put this ad up, and I'm like, okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? It's the most simplest ad. Yeah, it was so simple. And all of a sudden, I start getting responses. I'm getting people from the Discovery Channel. I'm getting people from NBC. I'm getting people from the WWE.
You didn't even mention the best part. You put this ad out during the writer's strike.
Yes, that was it. So I got all excited. I was like, oh my God, look at all these people applying. And I didn't realize the day I put the ad up was the day after the writer's strike had begun. So all these people in the industry were out of work. So my ad was right there up top. And they were like, oh, what a cool way to do something while I'm not working. And literally, I ran that one ad 14 plus years ago, and I've never read an ad since, ever. That group of individuals that came to that first event, our speakers, would go on to lead us to having people from the Phantom of the Opera. They would lead us to having people from Academy Award-winning directors.
Head of Warner Brothers casting.
Head of Warner Brothers casting of all of North America. Like literally the biggest names in the industry, because when you create a connection, that connection just grows. It's like a seed, right? In order for a seed to grow, it has to fall to the ground. It has to go below the ground, it has to go down, but then now it will grow up. And it's the same thing when we first started. That struggle, that hard work was that seed going down, but you break through the dirt and then you start growing. And I think it's such a valuable lesson. I really want to, talk about that. I'm so glad that we did, because I think for people who are listening to this, when they're starting out in this industry, they're that seed. And they just don't know how to reach the sunlight. They don't know how to burst through the dirt. They don't know how to, they're down there and they know they're struggling to get through, and they just don't realize like how close they can be, right? Like you could literally be 3 feet from gold. Yeah. And you're just waiting. Yeah. How much longer? When am I going to get discovered and stuff? And I think, in today's world, social media and the way the internet works, I think it's such a blessing, but for most people, they just don't know how to use it. They're more consumers of it. And they're the product, right? Because, you get to be on Facebook for free and Instagram for free, but they don't realize these are like billion-dollar companies, and they're utilizing your information to make a profit, and you become the product. So a lot of people, they don't understand that, but I think something we could talk about in a future episode about social media. But today, I think
just to piggyback on what you're saying, the reason why they love it is because you put a picture up and you're getting instant gratification. Unlike a seed, it's going to be a little bit of work.
Exactly. You got to be able to put, this industry, you need to be professional, you need to be dedicated, you need to be reliable. But the great thing was from that one ad, from that one idea, people could say, hey, you know what, when that first company went out of business, I could have said my whole life was done, right? Now all of a sudden the business is gone, everything's changed, and I could have just gave up, but I didn't. I pushed through. When I went, you saw that these agencies weren't interested in working in a digital format. I could have just gave up, you just went through. I could have said, oh my God, there's a writer's strike going on, right? We can't do this now. This will never work. But I didn't even know, because, just so based upon pushing through and just that ignorance of not knowing, I didn't know that I never saw myself as failing. So based upon not being able to ever see myself as failing, I could only see success. I always was just drive down that road. And I think so many people, when they get into this industry, they're so afraid of failing that's what holds them back. Like whether you believe you're right or you believe you're wrong, you're correct in both assumptions. Right. If you believe you're going to succeed, right? It doesn't mean you just go out there blindly, but you have to have a plan. You have to have a framework. And I think, right now, with our success and everything we've done, especially, since when, the world went into this whole, change of not being able to do live events, right? Just think about it right now. It's been almost, it's going to be going on a year soon since we've been able to do a live event. Think about that. We built this company over 14 years to such success, tens of thousands of success stories, working with the biggest names in the industry. And all of a sudden in March, I turn on the news and they're like, you can't host a live event. I'm like, wait a sec, that's what we do. We do live events. We bring talent in from all over the world. They get to meet and connect with some of the most powerful people in the industry. And literally, we could have both said, hey, you know what? We quit. There's nothing we can do. We're going to just give up. But we didn't. I was just like, no. Literally, within 72 hours, we had pivoted. We actually created the very first digital event for talent in the world. Our event would actually become like a showcase for companies like Tony Robbins, right? We actually worked with Sage, which is one of their companies also. But we created that whole online thing. So now what you see everyone else doing, we now are, have to jump ahead again. And as the world's opening up, I think, digital's here to stay. I think people being able to have this interaction, just like the way me and you are, I'm up here in New York, you're all the way down in Florida, and yet we're still able to share information and go back and forth. And, the success that we've had since we've went digital is phenomenal. Our talent have appeared in Toyota ads. They've appeared in, oh my God, the NFL. We have one of our talents. She's literally on an NFL commercial for clothing every week. We've had people in major music videos. We have people now doing readings and castings for major motion pictures. The industry's still going on. So if you're listening to this, don't think just because you don't have the connections, you're that seed underneath the dirt. You don't see the light. If you're able to push through.
Casting director for Machine Gun Kelly through us, and the next day she was on set and had 2 million views the first hour.
Yeah, one of our talents was just in a national AT&T commercial. She's literally the face of the AT&T commercial coming out, the Christmas commercial. We have talent. So the work is there. It's just a matter. It's I think sometimes we forget because now we're so accustomed to it. We're just working with casting directors and producers. Obviously we launched our mother agency. So now we're representing talent worldwide. And I think really having this conversation today really makes me realize, when you're brand new, you kind of forget, how hard it is. But when you have the right connections, it just becomes so easy. Literally, I could just snap my fingers, pick up the call, phone, and just literally have anyone on a call with us. It's just get somebody booked for work.
You know someone that can.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how we got started. That's pretty much the short version. There's a lot of I think interesting stories along the way that I think we'll get to share as we kind of do these more often. But
I want to piggyback on one thing that you said. That very first event, I remember we had a snowstorm. It was a blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing the event at the Radisson, this little rinky-dink hotel, because we couldn't afford a big hotel in New York City at the time. And I'll never forget that morning. I walked in and it was right when we were starting. We had an MC, and I'll never forget. I looked at you and I said, well, what happens if they don't like it? What happened? And you said, well, you're putting them face to face with legitimate people. They're going to have everything that they want answered live. I mean, what option do they have if you're a recording artist or a model or a musician to get that advice live is unbelievable. And not only did everybody make friends with everybody else there, but they got signed, they booked work. Actually, we had 100% success story the day after our very
music
first
video.
event.
Yeah.
Because there was an artist there.
I still remember the name of it.
Video, and they needed extras. So every single one of those people that were at the conference got to be in a music video. And then they went on to lucrative careers, most of them that really wanted to do this because they now had a music video that was seen on MTV. They worked with an artist. They met the producers. They met the directors. And they learned about building relationships the right way. And I encourage anybody listening to this, our story is merely our story, but when you're a pioneer trying to, and I want you to think about it this way. If you're an aspiring actor, model, musician, you need to go with a company that actually has proven success. You need to think of, okay, well, what is it that I want to do and how am I going to do it on my own? And that's the most important, thing that Michael's going over here today is that, having that first event and being able to sit down face to face with real people live, it was never really done before on that type of level.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, but hey guys, I think what I want to do is I want to cut this episode right now.
There's so many good stories, Mike.
Yeah, there's just so many good stories we're going to be able to share. And I think, for the next episode, what we're going to talk about is the real reason why, what was our why we did this, and, how we can possibly help talent. I really want as you're listening to these episodes that you could literally walk away from these having the full knowledge on how to get started as a model, actor, musician, whether you've been doing this for 2 minutes or doing this for 20 years, the knowledge and advice that we have is so foundational. It can really transform lives, and it has already so many times. So with that thought in mind, my name is Michael Fomkin. This is Alycia Kaback, and you are listening to Hollywood Mindset TV Live and the VIP Ignite podcast. So we will be talking to you on our next episode. Have a great night, guys, wherever you are. Never give up, believe in yourself, and keep pushing forward. Thanks a lot.